And now to the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. Russia says Ukraine has launched one of its biggest drone attacks on the country today. Russia's defense ministry said all attacks approaching Moscow were destroyed and there were no reports of deaths. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the drone attack was aimed at civilian targets and that the capital's air defenses would be boosted. However, Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said 2 people were injured, one of whom was hospitalized in the early morning attack. A Ukrainian presidential aide denied Kyiv was responsible for the attack, but said that Ukraine enjoyed watching it unfold. Russian lawmaker Maxim Ivanov said it was the most serious attack on Moscow since Nazi attacks during World War II, saying no citizen could now avoid what he said was the new reality. Meanwhile, Russian forensic experts were seen in Moscow collecting what appears to be fragments of a drone that were used in an attack on the Russian capital, Moscow. Russia's emergency services were at the scene in at least 3 locations in Moscow, and a spokeswoman for Russia's investigative committee, Svetlana Perenko, said a forensic expert and investigators were following leads to identify those behind the drone attacks. Drone attacks deep inside Russia have intensified in recent weeks with strikes on oil pipeline installations and even the Kremlin earlier this month that Moscow has blamed on Ukraine. And the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, says that Kyiv has been hit by a 4th Russian attack in 2 days, and he's visited the site of a residential building that caught fire overnight after being struck by debris from a destroyed Russian projectile. He adds that 1 person was killed and 12 others injured. Russia has attacked Kyiv 17 times in May with drones or missiles, mostly at night, in an apparent attempt to undermine Ukrainians' will to fight after more than 15 months of war.
12 people have injuries, 1 people killed from attack last night, and last 2 days is attack number 4. Almost every day we receive the attack from missiles, kamikaze drones. Hometown, it's more almost 800 buildings destroyed, 417 more than 170 is last information. More than 400 buildings, apartments building destroyed. It's killed more than 160 people. It's 5 children. It's terror. It's genocide. Putin needs Ukraine without Ukrainians. It's terrorism. It's everyone. Yes, of course, worry about that, and Russians want to bring depression to our people. Instead, depression, people very angry.
And European Union's top diplomat Josep Borrell says he believes Russia will only be willing to negotiate if it wins the war in Ukraine, adding that he was not optimistic about what could happen in the conflict this summer. Speaking at an event in the Spanish city of Barcelona, Mr. Borrell said, in his words, "I'm not optimistic about what will happen in Ukraine. This summer, I see a concentration of troops on both sides. I see Russia's clear intent to win the war. Russia will not go into a negotiation if it doesn't win the war." Both sides are seeking the upper hand ahead of what Kyiv hopes will be a decisive counteroffensive. Armed with new Western weapons, Ukraine is preparing to push to try to take back territory Russia has seized in the special military operation, which it launched in February 2022. And President Zelensky's chief diplomatic advisor, Ihor Zovka, says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told global South nations that the Group of 7 summits this month, but Kyiv's peace plan was the only way to end Russia's war in his country. Mr. Zovka said Ukraine, which is preparing for a counteroffensive against Russian occupying forces, had no interest in a ceasefire and wants the implementation of its peace plan, which envisages a full withdrawal of Russian troops.
My president, together with G7 leaders, met the global South leaders, and supported by G7 leaders was explaining to the global South leaders that cannot be a Brazilian peace plan, a Chinese peace plan, a South Africa peace plan, when you're talking about the war in Ukraine. Russia should be deprived of instruments of aggression by the unanimous efforts of the international community. In peace formula of President Zelensky, we have items from 1 to 10. Item 1 is about nuclear security. Item 6 is about withdrawal of Russian troops from the whole territory. He listened very attentively. There was no immediate response, but again, his special representative Li Hui was given a very thorough and detailed information and briefings and the non-papers. He was meeting the people in person. So we will see. China is a wise country which understands its role in the international affairs. And if you start negotiations with Russia when part of your territory is occupied, this will mean the freezing of the conflict. That's the narrative, that's the desire they want to have, the idea they want to have, probably asking some countries to support this position, but the civilized community very clearly understands.
In the meantime, Russia's Interior Ministry has put U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham on a wanted list. In an edited video released by the Ukrainian President's office of Graham's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last week, Mr. Graham was shown saying the Russians are dying and then saying U.S. support was the best money we've ever spent. After Russia criticized the remarks, Ukraine released a full video of the meeting which showed the two remarks were not linked. Russia's investigative committee said that it was opening a criminal probe into Mr. Graham's comments. It did not specify what crime he was suspected of.
What did you do for your country?
Thank you very much for your coming. Thank you very much. Thanks, United States, people of the United States for all big support. President Biden, bipartisan support, Congress, and really we thank you so much.
Bipartisan support.
Yes, it's very important. So we appreciate we know that from first days we have total support. It's about 38 billion, and it's big support, very important.
The best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
No, we're on this is 457th day of a war that was supposed to last 3 days.
Yeah.
You amaze me. Your country amazes me.
It's about our people and about your people. Your people help our people. All our appreciations.
You remind me of our better selves in America. That there was a time in America that we were this way, fighting to the last person. We're going to be free or die.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
Yes, but they came to our territory.
In the meantime, Russia has threatened that the Black Sea grain deal will no longer be operational unless a UN agreement with Moscow to overcome obstacles to Russian grain and fertilizer exports was fulfilled. An agreement struck in July last year requires the United Nations to help Russia overcome any obstacles to its grain and fertilizer exports for 3 years. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the agreement was not being fulfilled at all. The UN-Russia agreement was reached at the same time as a deal allowing the safe Black Sea export of food and fertilizer from Ukraine following Russia's February 2022 invasion. This month, Moscow reluctantly agreed to extend the Black Sea grain deal for a further 2 months until July 17th, but said more progress had to be made to advance its own interests. Let's get a wrap on all of this. The VOA's Anna Chednikova joins me now from Kyiv. Anna, glad to have you on the program today.
Good evening.
Right, so the Russian capital, Moscow, and its surrounding areas have been targeted by rare drone attacks, which have been blamed on Ukraine. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, definitely we don't have any official confirmation from Ukraine. Ukraine is not taking responsibility. Ukraine is not saying that Ukrainian forces anyhow involved in that. So we cannot really have any independently verify information except of what Russian officials and Russian media is reporting. The only official, well, it's not even a statement, it's a comment that we have is from the spokesperson of the Ukrainian Air Force, and he said basically that he's seen the news, he enjoyed the news, but he will not comment on that because this is a certain internal Russian accident. This is what we have from him, and definitely. But if we look wider and discuss what is discussed in Ukraine, of course, Ukrainians and especially Kyiv citizens who are living under drone and missile attacks for months now, and tonight was another attack, and it was basically three attacks in just 24 hours. I can say that Ukrainians, they're actually enjoying this kind of news, not in an evil way, but just saying that, Russian people now might be closer to understanding what Ukrainians go through every day. So for the moment, this is only thing that I have to comment on that, because again, as I said, no official statements have been done by Ukrainians or any international allies.
So Russia seems to be making a lot more noise about this, Anna, whereas it's constantly shelling Ukraine. Are we seeing operations changing here? Are they embarrassed by this drone attack, even though Ukraine has not owned up to it?
Definitely this attack demonstrates that Russian air defense and Russian military defense of the capital is not as that strong as was always, told by Russia, because Russian authorities were always saying that Russia has the best air defense and Russia has the best protection, especially of the capital Moscow. So we clearly see that this is they definitely have certain gaps if these drones manage to enter the airspace of Moscow and even hit targets in Moscow, because as we see from the reports from Russian media outlets, there were some direct hits and also the hits of the debris. What is also important that if Russian media is accusing Ukraine in doing this, this means that Russian authorities accept the fact that Ukrainians managed to get this drone all the way through to Moscow, which is quite a long distance. And again, there is a question to the air defense, how air defense didn't manage to catch this to catch these drones on this long way. So, definitely there is this, kind of a ruin of a certain of a certain legend about the strongest air defense and strongest protection.
Kyiv itself has been hit by a fourth Russian attack in 2 days, and Ukraine says U.S.-supplied Patriot anti-missile defenses are achieving 100% interception rate. Do you envisage more retaliatory attack from Russia, even as these Western weapons are being used by Ukraine?
These weapons create, actually, it looks like truth that it's 100% result, because, all the ballistic missiles were destroyed yesterday, which only Patriots can destroy. And there were no hits. I think that for Russia, it's this, tactic that Russia is using and will probably use for as long as it will be necessary for Russian side. We clearly also see that a different kind of missiles which are used might be also used because maybe this weapons is also a target in certain way. But I don't think this would, the use of weapons or additional supplies would change Russian tactics. What could change Russian tactics is battlefield situation. So I think we should look closer to that.
And China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said that the war in Ukraine has now reached a critical juncture, adding that the Chinese government will continue to contribute to a political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. Do you think China is sitting on the fence in this war? Can China really play a position as a peace broker?
This is a very good question, and Chinese envoy was visiting Kyiv on the 16th and 17th of May. After that, he went to Europe, and reportedly he was supposed also to go to Moscow. At least this was the official travel plan that Chinese officials presented. In Ukraine, I can tell that experts in Ukraine, political experts, see it quite positively that China is trying to be kind of a neutral party and a certain peacekeeper party. And Ukrainian experts say that it's better to have China in this position than in position on which would be completely on the Russian side. But if we talk about society, and if society accepts, China as a neutral party, people on the streets in Kyiv, particularly, are more skeptical about this, and a lot of people see here in Ukraine China more as Russian ally. However, it was not confirmed that any military support was provided from China to Russia during this war and this phase of war yet. So definitely it's positive that China is trying to be the neutral party. And for Ukraine, it's positive because Ukraine definitely doesn't want China to be on the Russian side. But again, it will be very, very difficult to say at this point if China will succeed, because this would depend on how China would accept Ukrainian peace plan and how China would deal with Russia, because definitely China has certain tools and certain pressure to use on Russia. So for the moment, it's difficult to say, but it's definitely positive action from China to have this kind of position and have an envoy who would be responsible for this for this particular negotiations.
Right. So what do you think about the position of, there are several countries that have said that, they can work out a peace plan between Russia and Ukraine. Several European countries have contributed to this. But what about Africa? A country like South Africa, for instance, saying that it can work out a peace plan, to end the war. What do you think about, Africa's contribution to this?
First of all, I should say that President Zelensky and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, they currently have this talks with African countries and this developing relationship with African countries. And President Zelensky just today he announced that he had another conversation with representatives of the region, and Minister of Foreign Affairs is currently trip in the region. So Ukraine is definitely trying to develop this, area of relationship, because definitely before it was different level of diplomatic relationship between African countries and Ukraine. In terms of your question, again, the most important for any country, really, not only South Africa or any other African country or any other European country or China. So any country that will try to propose certain peace agreement should should base this peace agreement on Ukrainian peace plan. And this is what President Zelensky officially stated. And this is what Ukrainian officials say every time they comment on this kind of, possible peace agreement, which could be, which is already discussed and could be presented sometime in the future. So the most important is to include Ukrainian, the points from the Ukrainian peace plan and Ukrainian Ukrainian position in here and Ukrainian interests. This is what is important for Ukraine, and this is how it can work for Ukraine. So in this term, it's for the moment it's difficult to say exactly what would be the role of South Africa and if it could be successful, because we don't have particularly details on what South Africa is suggesting. On the other hand, we see that the summit, which is supposed to happen soon, and where President Putin is supposed to take part, would be happening. And we heard the news that actually Putin would not be arrested if he would arrive. So again, this is something that creates, additional sides of this position of these countries and position of the towards Ukraine particularly. So let's see. But again, as I already said, the most important for Ukraine, and this is according to Ukrainian officials and political experts here in Ukraine, that the most important is that Ukrainian peace plan is involved and and any agreement is based on that.
Anna, thank you for your time today, and please do stay safe.